One thing you need to know about me and my family is that we go to Oklahoma State University. And I learned this, I knew it growing up, but I really learned this when I was planning to go to college. And I said, to my parents, where should I go? My dad said, you can go wherever you want, but we go to Oklahoma State University. And I thought back on it, I said, I ended up graduating from there in 2008. My dad, he graduated from Oklahoma State in 1980. His dad graduated from there in 1958. And my great-grandfather graduated from Oklahoma State University in 1926. So if you want to know something about us, we go to Oklahoma State University. In fact, they already assume that my sons will go to Oklahoma State University. So we'll see, I guess. Today I want us to think about, what are we about? My family might be about Oklahoma State University, and you'll learn that in the fall. Listen, when they're losing a game that they shouldn't, I will already know about it. You don't have to tell me. You don't need to text me. If I seem tired on a Sunday because I didn't sleep, you'll know that's why. I'll know about that. But today I want to think about, what are we about? When we think about it from a church perspective, when we think about Crosspoint in particular, what are we about? Well, my name is Cale Courtright. I'm one of the ministers here, and we're so glad that you are here to worship with us today. I was gone last week. I'm excited to be back this week. Anytime you are gone, you can come back. I always miss being here with this church family. It's been a fun summer, but I'm one of those that have been counting down the days, a week from Tuesday. Sorry, teachers, but it is the best day of the year for the rest of us. And so we're excited to get back into some normalcy. It's been a great summer here, hearing from different voices and having some different experiences. But it will, for the most part, be normal going forward, except for next week. But after that, mostly normal going forward. So we're excited for next week. There's so many things going into it that I won't give you every detail right now, but you don't want to miss next Sunday. We're excited about that. 2 weeks ago, we asked you to join us in giving towards our Blue Bucket. That is what we call our benevolence fund, community service fund. It's all the money that goes in there. We don't use on ministries here, but we try to give it all away. Some of that looks like our Thanksgiving meal drive. We do meals for about 120 to 150 families every year. We're about to do school supplies for 7 or 8 different schools here in Grand Prairie. And so we asked you to join us in that. We asked for $18,500. And I will say, if you ask ministers across the country, the worst month to ask for money is probably July. That's when we asked. And it's when we needed to ask it. It's just a time people are traveling, you're on summer mode, you're not on normal mode, you know what I mean? And so we asked for $18,500, and as of Thursday afternoon, you all had given more than $25,000 towards that. I'll never forget in a staff meeting asking, how much money do we need? And they said that number. I said, well, ye of little faith. Well, that's not going to happen. And I was right. We raised way more than that. So thank you for being such a giving church. For everyone who gave small amounts or large amounts, for saying yes when God prompted you to give. Over the last month, I've been thinking a lot about what we are about. Asking that question, as a church family, what are we about? Now, I've worked here over 8 years, so I know us a little bit. I know what we're like. I know the things that we like to do, the things we're passionate about. But I still want to just ask that question, what are we about? I love the story that Kelly told us earlier. I think it encapsulates a lot of what we're about as a church family. In fact, many of you could tell a story like that of the warm feeling you got maybe the first time you came, maybe when you were new here. Hopefully you still get that. To answer this for our church-wide, though, I did ask it for myself first. I said, what am I about? Churches can all be a little bit similar. You've been to one church, you've been to many churches. There are certain things that make us unique as you get to know us, but, for the most part, we try to worship together, we try to teach together and learn together, we try to get you into community, get to know one another, but what are we about? For my own life, I started asking that, what am I about? And I told you part of my answer earlier, but to help define that, I asked maybe some more specific questions. What gets my time? What am I actually interested in giving my time towards? What gets my concern? If I were to tell you I'm worried about something, what would that be? If I don't sleep well at night, what am I thinking about? What's keeping me up at night? But also, what gets my passion? What gets my energy? What are the things that I'm really excited about? And I think we can ask all of those same questions for us as a church. What do we want to spend our time on? What are we concerned about? What are the answers the questions we're trying to answer in our world? What are the problems we're trying to solve? What are we passionate about? What do we get excited about? And I thought a lot about my 8 years here and how we could define that, how we could ask that question, what are we about? And then I just started thinking, that's a good question, but I have a better question. What should we be about? The past is the past. What's happened has happened. Who we were is who we were, but we can all grow and change, even as a church. So what should we be about? Regardless of where we were, what should we be about going forward? And I want to be honest with you for a minute. I'm not looking for platitudes. I'm not looking for churchy answers. We should be about Jesus. I'm actually about to say that in a minute, and I agree. But isn't that just such a churchy answer? I want to know truly where God is calling us, where He's leading us. What are we called to be about? And I will say, this question was asked to Jesus. That's what we're going to read about here in a minute. If you have your Bible, you can turn to Matthew chapter 22. It was asked to Jesus, but a little bit differently, but it's essentially the same question. And I want to make a pretty strong statement here at the beginning today. We should care what Jesus says. We should be concerned with what Jesus thinks. I know that sounds like a simplistic thing to say in a Christian church, but I believe that that's true. What Jesus says we should care about. We should want to do what He says. And I know you may be thinking, again, that that's pretty obvious. However, when I look at my own life, and I look at the life of this church, and I know of many of you, specifically also when I look at our culture, I think I could argue that we might say, yes, I care what Jesus thinks, or I care what Jesus commands or asks us to do. But do we really live that out? I mean, I might know the right answer, but it doesn't mean I live into that all the time. And in fact, I want to just say it pretty clearly this morning, that when you come to know something, when you learn something, whether you read it or you hear it on a podcast or you're watching TV, the news or something, when you hear anything and it's in conflict with something that Jesus says, and you have a choice to make, you should go with Jesus. Anytime, whether your favorite podcaster, your favorite writer, your favorite newscaster, whoever, whatever they say, if it is in conflict with something that Jesus says, believes to be true, or asks you to do, you should go with Jesus. That's why we're called Christians, because we follow Jesus. We follow all kinds of things in our world, whether it's sports teams or influencers or whatever. We follow all kinds of things, but nothing can take priority in our lives over Jesus. That's what it means to be a Christian, is to go with Him. So again, hear this clearly. Jesus and His worldview, Jesus should take priority in our life. If anything is counter in your life, it's okay to change. If there's something that you have held true for so long, that you have even staked part of your identity on it, it's okay to change and to follow Jesus. And that's what we call in the church, what we call repentance. Changing your mind and following Him. being transformed, walking away from the old you and following him. Jesus must take priority. In fact, I would say that Jesus is the priority. I love how Paul says it, one of my favorite passages. You saw a video spoke to it earlier also, but Colossians chapter 1 says this. The Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible. Whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. Jesus is before all things, and in him all things hold together. He is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead, so that in everything, he might have the supremacy. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. I love that passage. And really today I want to hone in on that first thing. In everything he might have the supremacy. And that includes your life. That includes your thoughts. That includes the way that you choose to live. That Jesus must take priority in your life. It's all about him. And I think for the most part, Crosspoint has done a pretty good job of making it all about him. And in that, we will not waver and we will not change. It is all about Jesus. How you live that out can look differently. And I want to invite you to pray with us about what God has for us in the future, making it all about and revolving around Jesus, but how it might be lived out in new and fresh ways in the future. So Jesus is number one. Therefore, what he says we should take as important in our life. And he was asked this question in Matthew chapter 22, verse 34. Hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. One of them, an expert in the law, tested Jesus with this question. Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? And in a culture with lots of laws, this is an important question. And we would want to know how Jesus answered this. Jesus replied, love Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All of the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. I was scrolling the internet the other day, wasting time, but having a good time as you do. And I saw this video that said, you might be thinking you're having a bad day, but look at these people who flew to Austria when they intended to fly to Australia. In fact, they said they have a whole booth for people who do this. It happens so often. Now imagine this for a minute. But by the way, I fact-checked it. You don't need to go Google it. It's actually not true. But it's a fun story, isn't it? But imagine this for a minute. That it's not just you. Imagine you're with a group. Husbands, imagine you're with your wife. And you're like, we're going to go on this great trip. Look, I've gotten everything taken care of. We're all packed. I know where we're staying. I know how the transportation we're going to need. And then you walk off the plane, and she looks at you. Yeah, I missed one detail. I forgot one thing. We're on the wrong continent. But otherwise, everything else is good. I think that's kind of what Jesus is saying here. You can get a lot right. You can get a lot right. But if you get this wrong, nothing else matters. You can get everything else right. But even Jesus says here, all the law and the prophets hang on these two. If you don't have these two, you essentially have nothing. You have to get this right. And Jesus, I think when we reflect on his life, he lived these two things out. His entire ministry was built around these two commandments. So here's what he said to us. Love God with all your heart, soul, and mind. Everything that you are. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. And you've heard before, how can we prove the first? Well, we prove the first by living out the second. It's hard to show that you love a God that you can't see, that isn't right here with us, but you can love the people in front of you. In fact, Jesus taught extensively on both, but he helped us expand our definition of neighbors a lot. Because, see, in his culture, it was important to know who to love. You think our culture's divided? That one, you could argue, is even more so divided. In fact, they may have believed they're just called to love their people. You know, the type of people, the ones who are clean, the people who are right. And you know, I would argue that we're not so dissimilar, that we're pretty good about loving our people, the people who we share maybe a background with or a hometown with, the people who are clean, who have their life together. It makes it a lot easier to love them. The right people, the people who believe like we do, who don't need much correction or changing. They've got it right. Those are easy to love. But I would put to you today that to truly love God is to love your neighbor. And to truly love your neighbor is to love God. But a question I have for us this morning is that while love is important, can love actually be commanded? I mean, I was thinking about when I was growing up living in my parents' house, if they would have said, hey, we command you to love this person. Our best friends, they have a daughter. We command you to love them. I'm pretty sure that would not have worked out in my life. Just saying. I mean, they would say, we command you to love your brothers. That was hard enough. Can love actually be commanded? And I think it depends on our definition of love. So, like many of you, I assume, I've been watching the Olympics. I enjoy that. I love watching all the different events. And I really love to imagine which one I could take part in. You know, I'm thinking 2028 is a little close. But there are some that by 2032, I think I could be ready, you know? That if I dedicated the next 8 years, I could be ready to go. Now, if there are any Olympians in the audience, I know that I've just offended you. Because you hear their stories of how they put in so much time and energy, they dedicate their life to it. And can you imagine that moment that you get the call or that you've finished the race or whatever and you've made the Olympics? You're on the team. That's just the achievement of a lifetime. Yeah, winning a medal then becomes the next one, but you got to make the team first, you know? And how that can be just the defining characteristic of your career. Well, this story actually is true. There's a gentleman in this year's Olympics from Australia, theme of the day, Australia. And he made the Olympic team for field hockey. Again, I think I could make it in field hockey, but he worked his whole career, his whole life, his whole sporting life towards this, made it. But after he made the team, he broke his finger. And they said, you're going to need surgery, and you're going to miss the Olympics. I mean, can you imagine how gutting that would be? How you worked so long, and now you're not going to make the Olympics, what you worked so hard for so long. And he went to his doctor, and he said, what if I got my finger amputated? Could I make the Olympics? And they said yes, and he made the Olympics. The word love in our culture is overused and abused. We love our grandmas. We also love our favorite TV shows. I love Chick-fil-A. You can use this word in all kinds of different ways. But biblical love is not so much about affection as it is about commitment. Biblical love is about commitment, primarily, before affection. It's about what you're dedicated to, not about how you feel. What are you willing to give up? What are you willing to do in the name of love? See, we come in here every single Sunday and we're reminded of things like what Jesus has done for us. how he went to the cross, how he saved us from our sins, how he made a way back to the Father, how we have a place with him. And when we're reminded of those things, our hope is that it does generate warm feelings of gratitude. That we are reminded and that we are led to loving God. That these feelings help generate that love for us. And all of that can be true, but again, biblical love is about your commitment, not about your affection. You want to have both, but what we are committed to is what we are commanded to do. See, it's not about, God doesn't ask you to love your neighbor and to have affection for them. In fact, maybe he hopes that you get there, but rather, we're called to love our neighbor or even our enemies. It's not about how you feel about them. It's about whether or not you will follow God's example, the example of Jesus, and care for their needs and give of yourself for the benefit of them. Again, you can feel however you want about them, but whether or not you will actually do it. In fact, I would just say that as an aside, this is what our marriages lack in our culture. Is that very soon we're going to hit the fall. There's going to be all kinds of movies that, let's be honest, more men than we'll let on will watch. All these Hallmark Christmas movies, And they will, in 90 minutes or less, fall in love. It doesn't matter if they were enemies to start. And they will feel that way. In fact, we often use this in the real world also. Just the feelings that I have for another person. And while that's well and good, and we do want you to have those types of feelings, when the Bible talks about love, it first and foremost, is talking about the commitment that you make. And often this is the part that we miss. So we have made a commitment to one another. And so what we see here is that what God is calling us to, what Jesus is leading us towards, is a commitment to the love of God and the love of another. And it's about our actions. It's about what we do. I love how Dallas Willard says this. He said, "Actions do not emerge from nothing. Rather, they faithfully reveal what is in the heart. It's the inner life of the soul we must aim to transform, and then behavior will naturally and easily follow." Let me give you an example. When you teach your kids, when you learn that lying is wrong, and you value honesty, so you know for sure that you should be the person that tells the truth. Well, once you're committed to the truth, that should be the overflowing of your heart. You start to tell the truth. You're committed to it, and then you live it. In fact, we have a word for when people don't do this. So for instance, let's say you think, yes, telling the truth is important, but let's say you don't. That you make lying a habit. Well, we have a word for that, and it's called hypocrisy. Hypocrisy is saying the right thing, but then not doing it. And in fact, I would say this is one of the main problems that plague the church in the 21st century. It's easy to know the right things. It's easy to believe the right things. It's easy to think it. It's a lot harder to live it. We can teach you all kinds of things. We can convince you of this or that, but it's really hard to get those beliefs into action. It's really hard to take what you believe in your heart or think in your mind and get it into your body, to live out with your hands and your feet. And so when you think about these two commands that Jesus gives you, to love God and to love others, it might be easier to first think of people in your life that do this well. Who do you know that lives this way? What is it about them that leads you to think that? What does it look like? What do they actually do that makes you think they're the kind of person that lives this out? And the next question for you is then, how can you follow their example? See, this is exactly what Paul wrote. He said, "Follow me as I follow Christ." That you need people in your life that you can go, show me how to do this. Show me how to live this way. In fact, many saints throughout history have lived out these two commands well, but no one has lived this quite like Jesus has. See, Jesus, in his love of God, would let nothing sway him from that, whether it was things like temptations from the devil, or even maybe good things like the crowds who wanted more of his teaching, who wanted more of his miracles, and he would not be swayed from his time with the Father. In fact, he's asked on more than one occasion, "Where have you been? We've been looking for you," for good things. Jesus was about his Father's work, living into his calling, even and especially when it got difficult. Why? Because he loved God with all that he had. Also, too, he showed us what it looks like to love our neighbor as ourselves. He loved his people through his teachings and his miracles. Jesus' heart broke for the marginalized, for the outsider. He even loved the Gentiles, people who were not in. And even in the end, he showed us what it looks like to love your enemies when he said things like, "Forgive them, Father. They don't know what they're doing." Jesus showed us what it looks like to live out these greatest commands. And so I want you to keep that in mind. Keep that in heart as we think and talk throughout the rest of the fall. In fact, all year we've been discussing what it means to love like Jesus. He showed us what it looked like. And my suspicion is that throughout the rest of the year, you are going to have many opportunities to show the world what it looks like to love like Jesus. The things will come to your lap, and you will have to make a choice. Will you love like Jesus? This is a reminder that this is our calling. Now, you've probably seen this online as well, but while you're watching the Olympics, especially the swimming, you've probably seen it online that said, if you feel useless today, remember, someone is lifeguarding the Olympics. And they always show a picture. They show a picture of some, 20-year-old who's bored and goes, if there's a problem, there's a way more qualified people here. And when you are confronted with a message like this, oftentimes I think the temptation is to think there's somebody better for this. I'm nobody. I can't live like Jesus, much less like those spiritual giants that I have in my life. I can't do that. I'm just one person. I've shared this quote with you before. One of my favorites from Mother Teresa said, "Not all of us can do great things, but we can do small things with great love." You may not be the next great evangelist. You may not be Paul, who writes half of our New Testament, evangelizes around the world. But you might be the right person to go to the next cubicle. That God might have put you right where you are for a specific purpose. That I would say that you are the right person to go across the street, to go next door. The person that you see all the time at the grocery store, the person who bags your groceries, that you are the right person to show love in those moments. God has put you where you are for a reason. At the beginning of this year, we had a series called Love Like Jesus. And one of the first things that I told you is I hope that you set some good goals for yourself this year. And I don't know how the first 7 months went, but you got 5 months left. You have a school year about to start. You can decide who you're going to be, the kind of person that you're going to be. And I hope you set some goals like you want to be in Scripture daily. I think it will transform your life, and I would put that before you. I hope you do make it a goal to be a prayerful person. Make this a regular rhythm of your faith practices. But I believe that you also need to put on that list that you want to love others like Jesus loved you. That it's not so much of if the right or perfect opportunity falls in your lap, but rather how can you live every day intentionally to love others. You have 5 months left of this year to make 2024 not just another year, but a year you look back on, you rejoice and give thanks for how God has used you Every Sunday that I leave, head up here, I think about my neighbors, and I wonder what they think about me. I wonder if they ever look across the street, they look over the fence next door, and they go, what is he about? What is that family about? I'm not so sure how they would answer that question. My hope and my prayer, not only for me, but for this church family, is that those that God has put around us, that they know what we're about. That they know that those are people who have been marked with the love of God, and love pours out from them. That's my hope, that both your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers see in you is the love of God. And so today, as we close, our shepherds and their wives will be around the room. And if you don't know where to start, this is the best place to start, is to pray with them. And to offer a simple prayer to God that you would become a loving person. That you have experienced the love of God, now you want those around you to see that love in you. Today, maybe you've never said yes to Jesus through baptism. And today you say, I want to be all in. I want to make that kind of commitment. I won't let anything hold me back. Again, I would invite you to pray with one of our shepherds, and whatever we can do to help you today, won't you come while we stand and sing.